Welcome to the Buddhistisches Tor Berlin podcast. Here we share talks and reflections from our Buddhist center in Berlin, exploring themes such as meditation, ethics, and the path of awakening in everyday life. We are part of the Triratna Buddhist community, and our talks are offered freely in a spirit of generosity. We hope this episode supports your practice and your life. Okay, so it looks like this is all of us, and a new appearance in the room. It's already making a difference because I have to stand up to give the talk because I can't see everybody. So just the appearance of this in the room is changing the atmosphere to a usual Saturday morning or just after the morning. So for most of us in the room, we'll never have seen this in here before. It has been in here before on special occasions, but for most of us, this is a first. And yeah, if you're here for the first time this morning, this doesn't usually happen. So something has appeared in the middle of the room. And it's a stupa. So I think probably you know that, but maybe not, because we don't see many of these around, at least in the Western, or the so-called Western part of the world. If you went to Buddhist countries in the East, you'd see these all over the place. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're really small, sometimes they're kind of tiny things on clay molds, and sometimes they're absolutely huge and massive with flags coming off them and people walking around on the steps. So obviously we don't have that here, but you can imagine how big they are if people can walk around on the steps. Sangharakshita, who's the founder of our community, back in the 1960s, he gave a talk in, I think, 1971, early 70s, about stupas. And he said in that talk that they're probably the most important Buddhist symbol that we have. But I think in Western Buddhism, let's call it that, in Western Buddhism, the stupa is kind of peripheral, if at best. We very rarely see stupas, maybe in retreat centers, but you would probably never go to a Triratna Buddhist center somewhere in Europe or in the UK and see one of these instead of a Buddha. So the classic image that we have, the classic symbol is the Buddha image. This less known. So I wanted to bring it into the room, bring it into our awareness and into our into our minds, just so that we can give it some thought and see maybe there's something important in this. So the appearance today, this morning, of this stupa, it echoes the appearance of a stupa in one of the most widely known Buddhist sutras, which is known as the White Lotus Sutra. Anybody read that? A few people. Yeah, okay. It's an interesting one. There's copies in the library, so do feel free to have a look. About halfway through, after several different stories and parables, halfway through, the Buddha, Shakyamuni, so the historical Buddha of our time, he is about to give the teaching of the White Lotus Sutra. So he's gathered there with lots of his followers, and they're all really excited because the Buddha's about to teach the teaching of the White Lotus Sutra. But then all of a sudden, out of the ground, this massive stupa just shoots up. And it's really massive. And it's not made of steel and cloth, it's made of 7 precious substances. It has flags all over it and banners all over it and umbrellas all over it. Really kind of spectacular appearance. And everybody in the assembly is like, whoa, what's happening? And if that wasn't miraculous enough, then the stupa starts to talk. And it says, excellent, it's excellent that the Buddha is about to teach the White Lotus Sutra. So just listen So it might seem like our stupa here has appeared, but it's not talking. But it is talking. Yeah, so it's talking a different sort of language. It's not speaking English, it's not speaking German, it's not speaking in words, but it is speaking to us by its presence. Yeah, so our task over the next half an hour or so is to see if we can listen to the stupa. I'll be trying to do some mediation and communicate something of what it's saying to us, but it's using the language of symbols. Yeah, so it's speaking a symbolic language. So that's what we need to learn for the next half an hour, is to listen to the language of symbolism that this is speaking. And the White Lotus Sutra is speaking, so I'll come back to that later. The White Lotus Sutra itself is speaking symbolically, even though that is now printed in books that you can read in the library. Okay, so we've got a stupa, we're listening to it. Our next task is to ask, well, what is it? Yeah, so what is this thing? And why does it appear in this particular form? And a good way into that question is to ask, well, where does it come from? Yeah, so not from the basement, but where does it come from historically? How did this develop? And one of the earliest stories about stupas goes right back to the time of the Buddha. And the Buddha, at the time of his death, so in his last days, people start to ask him, how should we remember you? What should we do after you're gone? It's a massive concern for them, because the Buddha's been enlightened and teaching for 40 years or something. And they know he's about to die. He's sick, he's very old, he's in his 80s. And they're wondering, what are they going to do when he's gone? When their teacher's gone and they still need him and they still need his teaching, what are they going to do? So they're concerned about how they can keep him in mind, how can they remember him. And the Buddha tells them that after he's gone, they can take the relics, the remains of his body, and they can put it inside of a stupa. So he takes his robe, which was probably not anything like this, but this is the prop. So he takes his robe, or his outer part of his robe, he folds it up into a square, and then he takes his begging bowl, which again was probably nowhere near as big as this, and he says, you can place the bowl on top of the robe and put my relics in something like this. And that's how you should remember me. Yeah? So in a sense, that became the first Buddhist stupa. It was a way of remembering the Buddha and keeping the Buddha in mind through his relics in some kind of form like this. And then again, if any of you have been to countries in the East, in India, you'll have seen that this shape exists as monuments, but again, massive. So the stupa at Sanchi, have you been there? You've been there, okay. And some of you might have been there. How big would you say is Sangadarshini?
It's probably up to the windows or higher.
Yeah. So these massive domes begin to be built. And they spread throughout India, northern India and Pakistan, as the Buddha and the Buddhist Sangha grows. So always containing relics of the Buddha or significant people, significant teachers. These monuments begin to spread and are there to, in a sense, always represent the Buddha. Yeah, so this was at a time when we didn't have images of the Buddha like this. The first images of the Buddha, the first things that help people recollect the Buddha were these stupas. Or you get sometimes depictions of the Buddha's footprints. There are probably some at the Humboldt Forum. I can't remember, but you get some of these earliest Buddhist symbols or ways of representing the Buddha. Yeah. And then that develops into actual images of the Buddha. But the stupa takes its own track. So the stupa starts to develop as well, from this simple dome shape to something more like this, more stylized. So you could say then that the stupa, or what the stupa is a symbol of, quite simply, is the Buddha, a way of remembering the Buddha, even if it has evolved from the original design. But then why would we remember the Buddha? Well, we would remember the Buddha because of his life and what the Buddha did in his life, which was what we describe as being a life dedicated to and a life in which he realized enlightenment or awakening. Yep. So all the limitations that we feel as human beings, all the restrictions, all the suffering that we experience as part of the human condition, the Buddha is said to have resolved. Sometimes it's said he transcended that suffering. He's free of it. He's realized in his life the end of his own suffering. So that, in a sense, is what the stupa is telling us. It's telling us that the Buddha achieved that or realized that, but also that we can also achieve and realize that. So it's a symbol of the Buddha, it's a symbol of his enlightenment, but it's also a symbol of our own potential to realize that too. Because we're no different from the Buddha in that respect. The Buddha started from a position of suffering and wondering what the hell could he do about it. And nothing else that he encountered seemed to work. So he dedicated his life to discovering a way out of suffering, a way to end suffering and enter something completely free and blissful. And we can do that. We're in the same position. I'm assuming everybody in the room suffers in some way. I'm assuming everybody in the room also experiences some glimmer of freedom from that, or the potential for freedom from that, or you wouldn't have come to a Buddhist center in the first place. And there's something here perhaps that you think might be of help. And the stupa is saying, yes, there is something here that might be of help. Here's your potential. Yeah. So the stupa then is a symbol of the goal. You could also say it's a symbol of the path. So a lot of the symbolism here, if we can listen to it and hear what it's saying to us, it's also telling us how to do that, how to move towards enlightenment and freedom from suffering, how to move away from the suffering that we experience in life. So how is it doing that? And this is where it gets a bit more specific, let's say. Yeah. So just bear with me. The stupa is disturbing me because, like I say, I'm standing up, which is unusual. I also have some notes today, which I don't normally do, but it's affecting me. So I'm going to look at my notes this time. Yeah, okay. So let's just look a bit more closely at the stupa. So this was made, wasn't it, by a woman in Essen? Was it Claudia? Is that? Yeah. And apparently she was an engineer, Lalita Ratna was telling me. So it's very precisely made. The different pieces of steel, they line up perfectly. I can see them underneath. And what she's done very skillfully is created this kind of step structure. But that itself is an elaboration of a simple cube. So usually the base of a stupa, or what this evolved out of once it had gone beyond this, is from the robe that was folded up, we got a cube. So just imagine that the bottom part is a simple cube shape, yeah? And then here, again, this is slightly more stylized, but this is an elaboration of a sphere or a ball shape. And then on top of the ball is a cone. Again, we've got the addition of this piece here, which is another later development. but imagine just a cone here. So that's three things: the cube, the sphere, the cone. And then on top, originally there was just this piece, which is a kind of crescent, like a moon or an upturned bowl. I think this part is kind of umbrella, stylized umbrella, which they would put on stupas for kings or monarchs or leaders. But just this part is what we're interested in. And on top of this part is a jewel drop, which is on fire, which is this flame. So we've got 5 key shapes: the cube, the sphere, the cone, the upturned crescent, and the jewel drop. And those 5 shapes are representations, are symbols for what Buddhism regards as the 5 great elements. Yeah, so the 5 great elements that make up the whole cosmos. So when we hear elements, we probably think of material substances, like in the, I'm rubbish at science, but you know that big table, the periodic table of elements, that's it, thank you. We think of that. So what are the different material substances that make things up? It's not quite like that in traditional Buddhism and Buddhist cosmology. So the 5 great elements are a way of describing, if you like, what is out there. So Buddhism doesn't make this distinction that we might make in Western thought between mind and matter, where we might traditionally say, well, there's mind inside and then everything outside is matter. Buddhism doesn't really go in for that, so there's no distinction of that kind. Instead, what Buddhism might say is that there's perception. So there's awareness, there's consciousness, and things are being perceived. And in that perceptual situation, there is part of it that seems to be objective, stuff that we perceive out there, and part of it seems to be subjective. Yeah? But all of that is mediated through our senses. So our sense of touch, taste, smell, seeing, hearing, and the sense of mind. Yeah? So the 6 senses in Buddhism, mind is a sense. So all the mental content we're perceiving through mind. So for example, I think I'm standing on the floor and I know exactly what the floor is because I can feel it through my feet. Yeah? But really, I've just got some touch sensations. You can all do this little experiment yourselves. You've got the touch sensations beneath you. You can see it, and you have an idea, a concept of what floor is. Yeah? So not only is this the floor, it's the shrine room floor. It's wood or laminate, I'm not sure. I'm not a builder either, as well as a scientist. So I've got ideas about it, and I've got these sensations, both tactile sensations and visual sensations. But do I really know what the floor is? Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? Because if we really started to look more deeply, it's like, well, what are those sensations that I feel under my feet? Yeah, are they stable? Are they changing? Are they moving? Yeah, they're kind of moving. There's some temperature that's changing. What are my visual impressions of the floor? Well, it's made up of light, it's made up of color, it's covered in other things that I have ideas about. Where does the floor of the shrine room begin and where does it end? And then I've got my ideas, and where have they come from? And I'm using the English language to communicate to myself that this is the floor. Some of you might have different words for it. So you see how we build our experience from the impressions that we're getting through the senses. So no mind versus matter, the elements then, the elements become ways of describing the qualities of that experience. So we've got the objective aspect, the subjective aspect. But in terms of the objective aspects, the elements are ways of describing the qualities of what's going on. We don't really know, but we can say there are certain qualities. So the first of those qualities is represented by the cube at the bottom of the stupa, and it's the quality of earth. Yeah, so we can say that in our experience, there's this quality that is earth-like. Yeah? Or, even more helpfully perhaps, we can say that there's a quality of stability. Yeah? There are things in our experience that are stable, or there's things where we experience resistance. So under my feet, I'm experiencing some resistance, or I just fall through it. And it's helpful to have these concepts. So if we go outside and we cross the road when the person is red and there's a bus coming, it's no good me starting to philosophize about how the bus is not really a bus because it's just a concept. Because at some point, I'll have quite a strong experience of resistance or the earth-like quality, and then you'll be putting me into a stupa in a couple of weeks' time. So resistance is one of the qualities we go around and we experience. Yeah? And that's represented by this cube shape of the stupa. Another quality is the quality of water. Yeah? Water as a symbol for the fluidity in our experience. Yeah? So you can experience that now. You can feel in your mouth, you have the tongue, but there's also a fluid sense. Yeah? There's something water-like inside the mouth or on the film of the eyes. But there's this quality, we could say, also of fluidity and of things being able to move, take the shape of other things. Yeah? So that's another quality of the objective part of our perceptual situation. On top of that, we have the cone, which is a symbol for the element fire. And fire is that aspect of our experience that has temperature. Yeah, so the quality of temperature, we could include hot and cold. So sunny day today, we're all wearing t-shirts because something in our experience this morning said it's going to be warm. Sangadarshini was really happy about that earlier. So it's warm, great, we can just wear a t-shirt. We don't have to worry about having more clothes. So we read that quality of our experience. Then at the top, this upturned crescent is the element air, symbolizing the element air. But again, it's not something material, it's not oxygen or anything like that. The quality of air is more a quality of movement. Yeah, so we see things in our experience, and like my arms now, have the quality of being able to move. We go outside and we look at the trees and the leaves are kind of moving in the wind, we say, or in the air. And then right on top, that flaming jewel drop is the quality in our experience of space, which is a little bit more difficult to describe, but the sense that all the things that we can experience, there's some kind of openness within which resistance happens, within which things flow, within which things have a temperature, within which things move. So space is quite mysterious, but that is represented by this jewel drop. Okay, so they're the 5 qualities of our experience, let's say. So if you like, the stupa is saying, as Buddhist practitioners, can we really look at our experience and can we see how these qualities are there and they're helping us build a sense of our life and our experience of life. So it's a way of looking, is another way of putting it. It's a way of helping us to look, to really see beyond the ideas we might form that are helpful to some extent, but not helpful beyond a certain point. Yep. So if I get too attached to my ideas of how things are, and then, like this has appeared, something of reality just appears to upset my ideas about how things are, that's when I start to suffer. So if I want to suffer less and be more like the Buddha, I have to really look at how experience happens and how it unfolds, and let go of my ideas about things and let go of my fixing and grabbing hold of things. Okay, I didn't expect it to be that technical. So where to go next? It's interesting, the arrangement. So the stupa has this particular arrangement, stacking the elements one on top of the other. Earth, water, fire, air, space. Apparently that emerged in the Vajrayana phase of Buddhist development, so some 100 years after the Buddha's death. The Vajrayana and the Tantric tradition became very interested, not just in metaphysics and we've got this idea of the elements, very interesting idea and map. But they would ask, well, where do we find those in our actual experience here and now? That was their big concern. And one of the things they did is they took the elements and incorporated it into the symbolism of the stupa. So then we get this stack of cube, earth at the bottom, sphere on top, fire on top of that, air on top of that, and space on top of that. So that's an interesting question. Why did it develop into this particular shape? Yeah. So the way they might talk about it is in terms of energy. So I wanted to talk about energy today, because there is something about this, even before I start to explain some of the symbolism further. Like I said, having this in the room has changed something energetically, at least for me. Maybe for you. Maybe you walked in the door after the break and you were kind of, there's something else appeared. So it has an energetic effect just looking at it. And the way that might be described in terms of the Tantra and in terms of the Vajrayana is that the bottom shape, the cube or earth, could reflect a sense of energy being quite static and even a bit stuck and even a bit blocked. Yeah? A bit like an ice cube. Yeah? We get ice cubes, don't we, when the water has frozen and become hard and solid. So in that sense, we could say that when we're in states of real suffering, we feel that, don't we? A kind of contraction, stiffening up, not feeling like we can move, not really wanting to move sometimes. Or just any time we experience resistance, there's a kind of blocking of energy, holding of energy. We feel something is not moving, and that's how we know something's not okay, yeah? So out of that, if we could free ourselves a little bit from that sense of being stuck and blocked, something more fluid can emerge, which is represented by the water element and the sphere. So things begin to move. It's not complete freedom because water can't just go wherever it likes. Water takes the shape of other things, doesn't it? It moves downwards as opposed to upwards. So water is a bit more fluid. Again, if our ice cube were to melt, then we'd have a little bit of water instead. But then the fire element represents how that energy, once it's been freed to some extent, can begin to move up. And we could take up as being a metaphor for more inspired, rising, more energetic, more free. So the fire element kind of represents that growing inspiration and energy and uplift, feeling uplifted. We say that, don't we? I don't feel stuck anymore. Actually, things have melted. I feel a bit more free. And actually now I feel more uplifted. So these become kind of progressive stages of spiritual life. It's a way of describing how spiritual life can unfold through practice. And then above the fire element we have the crescent and the air element. And that, I guess, is an experience or a state in which we're not just going up, we can actually go anywhere. You have the freedom to just move and be free and to move anywhere. And then the space element at the top, again, it's a bit mysterious, but if that's a rainbow flaming drop, rainbow colored drop, I mean, rainbows are very strong symbolically, aren't they? Appearing and disappearing, not being held by any kind of form or anything at all. In the lecture Sangharakshita gave on this that I mentioned earlier in the 70s, he used an image of, it's like being a person kind of stuck in the dark at the bottom, the cube, but then suddenly you realize actually you're not just completely stuck in the dark, you are in a little room. So the water element is you starting to walk around in the room. You can't go very far because there are walls, but at least you can move around. The fire element is like making a little hole in the ceiling, pushing it out and then seeing, oh, there's some sky up there. Then the air element is you levitating and floating up and out of the room. You're free. You're not bound by the walls anymore. You're just in the air and you can maybe fly around. And then the space element is more like you've disappeared altogether and there's just some consciousness or awareness. So for the Tantra, the stupa then starts to symbolize this is the path. This is what one can expect or what one can aim at as you move closer towards the goal of enlightenment and become more like the Buddha, is this progressive release and liberation of our energies. Which I have to say I find quite an inspiring prospect, to become more and more free-flowing in energy. That's great, isn't it? When that's happening, I feel good. Of course, it doesn't mean, and it's not saying that if you practice Buddhism, it will be this wonderful ladder into heaven, in which you'll just feel more and more free and have more and more energy. In fact, it could feel the reverse sometimes. As we practice, we also get to know the cube a little bit more. Yeah, we get to know the water state and how we move between opposites. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad. I don't really understand that, but that's what happens. And then, yeah, sometimes we do feel the inspiration. Sometimes the fire of inspiration can even burn us. Yeah, and the movement and moving around, well, that's very free, but also challenging, particularly if this lower dimension returns at certain times. So I don't think it's saying this is a very clean, easy sweep and thing to do. But yeah, I think it's good to look at what Buddhist practice is all about through the prism of energy and liberation of energy. I thought I'd just say a few things about, I'm not using these anyway, so I thought I'd just say something about the way that we practice specifically here, and yeah, maybe with a particular view towards, sorry, I just rang the bell with my notes. I thought for a moment the Stupa was talking, but it's not. I thought I'd say something about our approach to practice, and particularly the system of meditation, how it might fit with some of this. Because that was the Tantra's other great concern, that okay, we can have the stupa, and now we've got this nice image of how energy unfolds and how spiritual life is this progressive unfolding of energy. But again, where is that in my actual experience? Yeah. So the Tantra begins to look at, well, where's the cube in this, my psychophysical being? Where's the sphere? And they come up with this map of how these elements and the different shapes map onto the human body. So for them, the cube is right in the root chakra, right at the bottom of the torso, where we touch the ground when we're sitting in meditation. That's where we experience the earth element. The water element is here, around the solar plexus, in the guts, let's say. The fire element is here in the heart, the air element in the throat, and the space element in the head or on the crown of the head. So for them, this wasn't just an abstract thing, it was also something that could be explored internally as well. And I was thinking about our own practices and how they correspond to some extent to that. So right at the beginning this morning, Sangadarshana definitely did it. I'm sure the other people leading the sits too. They would have done some kind of what we call a body scan, yeah, or just bringing our awareness into the body. It's probably the first thing you all did when you went to a Buddhist center. Somebody gave you some kind of pointer towards more body awareness. So for me, that's like our way of doing the earth element. Stability, bringing awareness to the quality of stability in our experience, is to bring awareness into the sensations of the body. And that's really important, because often we experience ourselves as being in the head, or being in thoughts and being taken away from thoughts. It's not that we're not in our bodies when that happens. We're quite embodied all the time. Let's not worry about that. As we said before, there's no distinction between mind and matter in Buddhism. But the problem is we're not conscious of our bodies. We're not aware of our bodies. And that can create a tension, because the mental part of us is off somewhere and the body's kind of left behind and gets a bit like a cube. Yeah. For example, I start to become a cube when I'm checking if my team have got to the playoff final at Wembley this afternoon, which they have. Anyway, I had to get that in somewhere. So we are embodied all the time, but if we bring awareness to the fact that we're embodied all the time, then the energy comes out of the cube and starts to move a bit. So we do the body scan at the start of meditations to make it more clear that mind and body are just appear as two aspects of our experience, but are completely intertwined. Then I was thinking about our other practices. So we did the mindfulness of breathing in here this morning. We also do the metta bhavana and alternate the two. I had a case for the sphere being more mindfulness of breathing and the fire element and the cone being more metta because of the heart element. Actually, I think both of the practices are working in these areas. So the mindfulness of breathing, as we all know, we start to become aware of the breath, and then we notice how difficult that is and how many distracting thoughts come up, or traditionally what's known as the 5 hindrances. So we experience restlessness, we experience sleepiness, we experience doubt, we experience desire for sense things, and we experience an aversion to things and are pushing away. So those 5 patterns can emerge in meditation. And we might flow between them and states of being a bit more absorbed. So there's a kind of fluid experience in the meditation. And what we're trying to do with the practice is become more and more together and coherent. It's a practice where we're trying to get to know ourselves. It's a practice where we're more aware, or opening up more awareness to what's going on in the depths, what's going on in the guts of our experience, of our lives. What are the things that we miss a lot of the time? Yeah, so this sphere, this watery sphere, it's like we're plunging into that, going for a swim in that when we do the mindfulness of breathing, and really getting to know ourselves in that sense. I think we're doing that in the Metta Bhavana as well, because as soon as we bring other people to mind, or bring ourselves to mind from more of an emotional point of view, we also get to know ourselves. So both the practices are helping us develop that self-awareness, self-knowledge. And then the fire element, I think when we're doing the Metta Bhavana, to the extent we are a bit more together, a bit more self-aware, something of uplift can come, or something of positive aspiration and intention and inspiration can start to come through. I mean, it's an intense thing to do, isn't it? To sit for 40 minutes and wish ourselves and other people well. There's a fiery quality to that. It's not passive, it's quite active. Obviously there are different ways of doing the practice, but every time you say one of those phrases to yourself, like, may I be well, may I be happy, it's like we are lighting a bit of a fire, even if we don't feel it. Even if we feel like a cube, or a bit cold like ice, it's like we're just putting a bit of heat, adding a bit of fuel to the fire of our heart, let's say, and that can start to have a real effect, particularly if we do that regularly and over time. I think mindfulness of breathing helps that as well, because the more we have awareness, the more we can notice our own responses and really kindle that fire. All good? Okay. Then the air element and this upturned crescent. I was thinking about that in terms of our practice here, in terms of ethics and the ethical precepts. So not just meditation, but how do we actually take this body awareness, getting to know ourselves, being more aware, wishing others well. It's okay doing that in a shrine room or on a meditation cushion, but how do we actually spread that in the world? Because we want that to influence the world, presumably, for ourselves and our own benefit, but also for that of other people. So through the 5 ethical principles that are common to the whole Buddhist world and that we're trying to encourage in the community here, loving kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, mindfulness, that's really us activating the principle of the air element and allowing our Buddhist practice to really spread and affect our life, people's lives in our life, and people all over the world. And then the space element, I'm not sure. I keep coming back to the mystery of the space element. You could say that we have this other practice that we call just sitting. And sometimes we introduce that just at the end of a meditation. So, all right, we've done the 4 stages of mindfulness of breathing. Now we can relax all effort and just sit. But what are we just sitting in? So often we just sit and maybe the distractions come back, or the things that we're going to do next start to come back. But also in the just sitting, we could say something else is present, which is just that free, open awareness that is in a sense always there, whether we recognize it or not. So when we just sit, even if it's just for 5 or 10 seconds, if we just stop doing what we're doing and we just open up to our experience, it's a bit like we're at least mimicking the space element. We're stopping being the actor and the person moving around and doing things in our lives, and we're just stepping back and being the container and noticing how, well, the whole of our lives, the whole of our experience, a bit like a rainbow, is appearing and disappearing. And it's got the diversity of different colors and different people and different tones and emotions and all the rest of it. But it's all coming from the same source, let's say. And it's all dissolving, appearing, dissolving. So that's always there too. So let's just go back to the White Lotus Sutra, maybe a finish on this. So we'd got the appearance of the stupa and the fact it starts to talk. So the stupa comes and it starts saying, excellent. It's excellent that the Buddha is about to teach the White Lotus Sutra. And you can imagine, can't you, that everybody around there is shocked and intrigued. So one of them says to the Buddha, why is that stupa talking? Why is it that it's appeared and started to say, it's great that you're about to teach the White Lotus Sutra? And the Buddha says, yeah, way, way back in time, like unimaginable stretches of time ago, there was another Buddha whose name was Abundant Treasures. And he made a vow when he passed away, when he entered into the parinirvana, which is how we talk about the Buddha's final passing away, he made a vow that whenever anybody in the cosmos was going to teach the White Lotus Sutra, his stupa, where his relics were, would appear there. And that's what happened. So again, this is the language of symbols, remember. So there it is, the stupa of abundant treasures appears. And you can imagine, can't you, again, what then people thought next, which was, do you think it would be possible to have a look inside and see this Buddha abundant treasures from all those incalculable eons ago? And the Buddha says, well, there's another part of his vow that said that that would be possible. But first, all the Buddhas throughout the entire cosmos, throughout all the space and time, they have to come. So then the Buddha shoots a ray of light from a curl of white hair in the middle of his forehead into the sky, and it illuminates the whole cosmos. And all the Buddhas in all the different places all over the cosmos, they realize, that's the Buddha Shakyamuni calling us to appear in front of the stupa of the Buddha Abundant Treasures. So then they all appear and gather around in the sky. Space element, that's like a rainbow, isn't it? So just countless numbers of Buddhas all around in the sky. So that's happened, and then the Buddha knows it's time for him to reveal and open up the stupa and show everybody the Buddha Abundant Treasures. So because he's a master of the air element and all elements, he floats up into the sky, goes to the stupa, pulls aside this huge locked gate, opens it up, and sure enough, inside is seated the Buddha Abundant Treasures. And then he starts to speak. In fact, it's him who's been speaking. So he says, it's wonderful. It's wonderful that the Buddha Shakyamuni is here opening my stupa, and he's about to teach the White Lotus Sutra. And it's wonderful that all these Buddhas from across the cosmos have gathered to hear it. And then he invites the Buddha inside. So the Buddha Shakyamuni goes inside the stupa, and they sit down together inside the stupa. Yeah. So it's that's typical of Mahayana sutras, this whole cosmic drama of enlightenment. And it might sound weird. It does. And if you take that literally, that the White Lotus Sutra is some kind of historical account, maybe we're missing the point. But if we dismiss it as well as just being a load of nonsense, maybe we're missing the point. But it's trying to speak this language of symbols. So inside the stupa, all of a sudden, you've got a Buddha who doesn't belong in time. If it's unimaginable and so far back in time, it's so far back that he is outside it. Yeah? Not bound by time, not bound by space. When we're stuck in the cube, we feel like we're bound by time and space. Yeah? The Buddha Abundant Treasure is completely free of that. And yet, he's sat next to a Buddha that we know was a historical person and a historical figure. So it's saying, on the one hand, enlightenment is completely outside of all our categories and concepts, and yet it manifests somehow in our experience, either through the encounter with a Buddha or through our own, and more importantly, through our own realization of what that is all about. So we cannot say that being a Buddha, enlightenment, is somehow outside of our experience. It's kind of there all the time, running through space and time, but it has to come through a person, historical figure, erupt in time and space, like the stupa itself erupts within a particular space, in a particular time, like it has this morning. So, I hope that has been interesting. Some of the order members on the team here, when we put the blurbs in the WhatsApp group saying what we're going to talk about, we do a kind of likeometer. And how many emojis do different talks get? Just to see, like, what kind of subjects are people interested in. I'm not offended, but there were not very many for the talk about the stupa. And I was not surprised, really, because it's a bit alien to us. Like I said, we don't go around Berlin seeing these everywhere like we would if we were in Nepal. So it's a bit strange and obscure. But I think that's a shame. And personally, I've thought that for a long time. But personally, I've been getting more and more interested in what is this all about. And it's not just cultural Buddhism. It's speaking a universal language that is relevant to all of us, whether we consider ourselves Buddhist or not. I truly think it's communicating something profound about our experience and also about our potential as well. So do keep the stupa in mind. It will disappear like a rainbow shortly, but it will reappear downstairs in the basement. And I believe now there will be an announcement about next week in the basement, and you'll see the stupa there. So although it's the end of the stupa for this morning, it will be reappearing soon. So I'll finish there and then hand over to the announcement. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this talk, you are warmly invited to visit Buddhist Teachers Tour Berlin in Kreuzberg. We offer meditation, Dharma talks, and courses that support practice in everyday life. You'll find more information in the episode description.